All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling a massive story, a conflict that basically exploded overnight and sent shockwaves rippling across the entire globe. We're going to break down exactly what happened, how a full-scale war in the Middle East kicked off, all through the lens of a really gripping personal account. So, let's get right into it.
Friends, I have made many videos on wars, but it has never felt this personal. You know, when you hear something like that, it just hits different. It tells you right away that this isn't just about geopolitics, it's about people. And our story today starts somewhere you'd never expect, not on some remote battlefield, but right in the middle of what was meant to be a simple family vacation.
So, picture this. We're in Dubai. You know the place. All futuristic skyscrapers, incredible luxury. It's a global hub. But on this one particular morning, all of that just shatters. The city becomes an unexpected and, frankly, terrifying frontline in a war. I mean, can you even imagine waking up to this kind of chaos? Suddenly, there are explosions rocking the hotel right across the street. You look towards the airport, one of the busiest in the world, and it's just filled with smoke, totally evacuated. Drones are being shot down right over the Burj Khalifa, and actual missile debris is falling on landmarks like the Burj Al Arab. And just like that, for thousands of people, including members of our narrator's own family, the city turns into a trap. All flights are canceled. There's no way out. It's just utter chaos. Unbelievable. And really, the only question racing through everyone's mind is, why? What in the world is going on? What could possibly trigger something this massive? Well, the answer was nothing short of a geopolitical earthquake. And as the dust settled, all eyes around the world suddenly snapped in one direction, towards Iran. And here it is, the reason for all the chaos. The news starts to filter out. The United States and Israel have just launched a massive, full-scale military attack on Iran. And let's be clear, this wasn't some surgical, limited strike. No, this was the opening shot of a major, full-blown war. The operation even had a name, and it's a big one, Operation Epic Fury. And U.S. officials made the goal pretty clear, and pretty devastating. The plan was to spend several days just completely wiping out Iran's entire missile industry, just dismantle it. But that wasn't even the most shocking part, not even close. Because then came the news that just sent an absolute shockwave around the planet. The attack had targeted and killed Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. So it's not just a rumor. Iranian state TV actually comes on and confirms it. His death is real. The nation is immediately plunged into 40 days of mourning. And the strike itself, wow, it was incredibly precise. It didn't just kill him, it also killed his daughter, his son-in-law, and his granddaughter who were with him at the time. And if that wasn't enough, in a totally separate strike, a meeting of Iran's top military commanders was also hit, wiping out a huge chunk of the military leadership. We're talking about a full-on decapitation strike here. The entire leadership structure was the target. And the reaction on the streets of Tehran? It tells you everything you need to know about how divided the country was. You had some people, believe it or not, out in the streets actually celebrating. To them, a dictator was gone. But at the exact same time, you had others just weeping openly in public, mourning his loss. It's just this incredibly stark picture of a nation completely split down the middle.
So with its leadership basically wiped out, you just knew a response was coming. It wasn't a question of if, but when. And boy, when it came with a vengeance.
Iran's counterattack had a name too, Operation True Promise 4. And this was a huge multi-front retaliation, and here's the really critical part. They weren't just aiming for military bases. As we saw firsthand in Dubai, civilian cities were absolutely in the crosshairs.
I mean, the sheer scope of this counterattack was just staggering. This wasn't just about hitting back at Israel. No, Iran launched a barrage of missiles and drones at countries all across the Gulf. We're talking the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait. Essentially any country in the region that hosts American military bases became a target.
And to really get a sense of the scale here, just look at the numbers for the UAE alone. Official sources say Iran fired more than 1,100 missiles at them. That is just a mind-boggling number. But what's maybe even more astounding is the defense. The UAE's air defense systems managed to intercept all but 5. Think about that. 1,132 out of 1,137 were shot down. It's just an absolutely incredible display of technology under the most intense pressure imaginable.
And it wasn't just countries, it was U.S. assets. Iran's military, the IRGC, they came out and claimed they had hit 27 different American military bases across the region.
This was a direct, unmistakable challenge to the U.S. military presence in the Middle East.
Okay, so this is where the story gets a lot closer to home for so many people, because a war that seems like it's happening thousands of miles away can have huge, immediate, and really severe consequences, especially for a country like India.
So why does this hit India so hard? Well, look at this number. There are over 10 million Indians living and working in these very same Gulf countries. That's a huge number. So we're not talking about some abstract war zone on a map. These are the homes and workplaces of millions of Indian families, friends, and relatives.
And beyond that huge human cost, there's the economy. And what's happening here is what experts are literally calling India's nightmare scenario. Think about it. More than half of India's oil supply comes right through the Strait of Hormuz, the very waterway Iran is threatening to shut down. If that happens, you're looking at a sudden stop to oil imports. That means petrol prices at home would skyrocket, inflation would go through the roof, and the rupee would be under incredible pressure. It's a perfect economic storm.
So, the big question is, how on earth did we get here? How did a situation that seemed to actually be calming down, de-escalating, suddenly just explode into an all-out war? It doesn't quite add up. This timeline is it's staggering when you lay it out. So, it all started back in late 2025. Iran's economy collapses, leading to the biggest protest in the country's history. Super volatile situation, right? But then, by early February 2026, things are actually looking up. There's real talk of a diplomatic solution. In fact, literally the day before the attack, an official from Oman comes out and says a peace deal is within reach. Within reach! And then, the very next day, bombs start falling. The whiplash is just unbelievable. And in the middle of all these strategic strikes on military targets and political leaders, this happened. A bomb was dropped on a girls' primary school in the city of Minab. It was during school hours, and according to reports, at least 100 children were killed.
And then, shortly after the news of that school bombing started to spread, this tweet pops up from an official Israeli government account. All it says is, Israel has the right to defend itself. A defense, it's worth noting, for an attack that they and the US had initiated.
And that really brings us to the end of the story, but also to a much bigger and honestly a much more difficult question. A question about what these kinds of interventions are really all about. See, the official reason for Operation Epic Fury was, to remove a dictator and bring freedom to the people of Iran. But does that script sound a little familiar to you? Because we've heard it before, right? It's the same justification we heard before removing Saddam Hussein in Iraq. It's the same justification we heard before removing Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. And in both of those cases, what was the result? It wasn't a stable democracy. It was decades of chaos, civil war, and the rise of entirely new terror groups.
And so that leaves us with this one final, really critical question. On the surface, removing a leader seen as a dictator can look like a clear win. But history seems to show us time and time again that these foreign interventions often unleash something far, far worse. So the question is, will this time be any different? Or is the Middle East about to be plunged into yet another vicious, devastating cycle of chaos?